Assalamualaikum and good afternoon, everyone. So bisphenol A or BPA is the most serious case being taught by the food experts or food manufacturers regarding their safety level. So today we will have panel discussion regarding the risk of BPA contamination in canned food. So by my side, I introduce myself first. Of course, my name is Nur Jamalina. I am the moderator today. So by my side is the academic expert, Ms. Anshaki, the MOH representative, Ms. JC, and we also have the industry expert from Ayam Brand Sembilan Berhad, Ms. Mastura, and we also have Ms. Sharifah Nabiha here to share with all of us regarding to share her opinion regarding the BPA contamination as the public consumer. To start off this discussion, I will call upon our academic expert, Ms. Anshaki, to briefly explain what is actually BPA contamination, to expose to all of us before we go further what is actually BPA.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Moderator. BPA is a chemical component that used in the manufacture of the polycarbonate plastic or the epoxy resin that are used in some food packaging materials, such as a lining inside the metal-based food and beverage can, the reusable plastic containers, the tableware, and other products that we use in our daily life. The metal food and beverage can have a thin layer of coating on the interior surface, which is essential to prevent the corrosion and the contamination of the food and beverage with the dissolved metal. In addition, the coating also helps to prevent the canned food from becoming tainted or spoiled by the bacterial contamination.
So BPA itself is basically a chemical used in lining the inside of metal-based food and beverage cans. So could you please tell us what is the health effects for those who are affected by this contamination?
Okay, first, the BPA contamination is linked to the infertility problem. The researchers have found that the BPA contaminations will influence the hormone balance and lead to the male reproductive dysfunction. It will produce several defects in the embryo, such as the feminization of the male fetus, the increase of the prostate size, the shortening of the anogenital distance, the disruption of the blood-testis barrier, and the alteration of the sperm count, such as alteration of the sperm parameter, such as the sperm count, the motility, and the density. Men who expose to BPA will also display a reduced libido and the erectile ejaculatory difficulty as well. It does not affect men but women as well. A study found that a long-term exposure of the BPA of the female mammalians to BPA will lead to the endocrine disorder, and followed by the morphological and the functional changes in the ovary, oviduct, vagina, and uterus, which have been linked to the fertility issues. Other than the fertility problems, BPA exposure will also suppress the gene that required to make the right amount of the potassium chloride transporter member 5, or known as the KCC2, that will lead to the problematic level of the chloride. KCC2 is a type of protein that requires to reduce the amount of chloride. So, in the embryonic brain, when the neuron develops, so when the level of KCC2 are insufficient, the level of the chloride will remain too high, and this will damage the neural circuit and prevent the nerve cells from settling in the correct position in the brain. This may also, due to the BPA exposure, will drive up the level of another protein that known as the metal CpG binding protein 2 that will inhibit that particular gene to produce the correct amount of the KCC2. And the researcher found that such effects are more severe on the female neurons than the male neurons.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anshaki, for the very clear explanation. So BPA has a great potential in bring negative impact to the reproductive system for both men and women, and may lead to the infertility problem. So I personally think that we should avoid this from happening because of the negative impact to our health. So I'm sure that all of us today are so eager to get to know where is the BPA comes from and the mechanism in the canned food. So I would call upon Ms. Mastura to give some insight.
Thank you, Mr. Melina. BPA can leach into the food from the protective internal epoxy resin coating. The degree of the BPA leach from the coating depends on the temperature of the food product. For example, a can of mushroom soup have a greater exposed to the BPA contamination compared to the 3 can of fish. Why is it the canned soup has a higher BPA contamination compared to the other product? It is because the soup has sometimes this is in a solid and in a liquid. They need a long time to heat the soup so to get the equal temperature of the soup. So when we heat the soup, the BPA might migrate to the soup, and as we heat longer time, it will increase the BPA migration. But according to the EU Directive 2004, it is safe to consume the food that has a lower has a 0.6 part per million of canned food.
Such a clear insight, Ms. Mastura. Thank you so much. So now we bring you a consumer to share her opinion regarding the BPA contamination. So Ms. Sharifah, what do you think about this contamination when we know that the EU themselves has confirmed that the BPA is not accumulating in our body?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jamelina. So, as a consumer, in my opinion, the consumer has a concern about this issue because it might be challenging to know the canned food are contaminated by BPA free or not, because there is no standard labeling in Malaysia. However, many companies are willing to claim their can of BPA with a little more certificate and effective from their supplier. However, in some cases, many companies believe them to buying a BPA free can. Unfortunately, we has an independent tester. We get the BPA. The can is contaminated by BPA.
Yes, it seems that it's a very serious concern for consumers. So, in a time where information is so accessible to everyone, so how can we tell which one is correct, which one is wrong? So, Ms. Mastura, do you have any adds-on to this concern?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marina. Nowadays, food industry start aware for this issue, and they took an alternative to solve this problem, because there are high demand from the consumer itself, and consumer tend to choose the food can which is BPA free. For example, Ayam Brand company is switching all canned food to the BPA free. Ayam Brand took the decision at the beginning of 2012 to switch all its canned food to the BPA free lining, and there is remove neither BPA or any similar family BPA such as BPS. This at that time there is no widely at that time consumer do not have very eager to know about BPA, but at that time industry start to formulate, start to research on the start to give a lining that have BPA free. However, to have a standard certificate and assurance, government should establish regulation so that a consumer may more confident to choose the canned food which BPA free from the BPA. Thank you.
Thank you. So back to Ms. Sharifah. Do you have any opinion or suggestion on how we can limit the intake of food being packed in the BPA based packaging, on how to also make a smart buying decision in order to avoid ourselves from being affected with this contamination?
Okay, as a suggestion for a consumer, we also never avoid to consume our canned food. However, we can substitute with fresh food or others dry food. Either we consume canned food. However, we need to we never heat the canned food itself because it might be contaminated with BPA. So, as a smart decision to the consumer, consumer who have any inquiries about this BPA status, so the customer can ask the company and ask the company to get information about canned food status. However, we also try to urge company to shifting their BPA can to BPA free can, so that the customer can get all information and can be make a good decision before buying the canned food.
So, all right, actually a lot of information and tips from her just now. So, especially the point whereby she said that we have to avoid ourselves from heating the food directly in the can, because Ms. Mastura has told us that actually the degree of BPA leach is depending on the temperature of food. So let's ask our MOH representative, is there any regulation or action by MOH regarding the use of BPA based food packaging? Industry may not always be ethical. So from a policy making aspect, is there any action being taken to ensure the public health and safety?
Sure. All right. Thank you so much, and good afternoon to all. So before I go into what is happening in Malaysia, I'd like to touch a bit on some global policies. So you see that globally, especially in the EU, it's already been banned in 2011, the usage of BPA in infant feeding bottles. So that's something that's already been taken care of. But if you look into the other food packaging materials, there's actually still being allowed to have BPA inside with a maximum amount of leaching permitted. So according to the EU directive in 2004, it's actually allowable to have 0.6 ppm of BPA leaching into your food itself. But one of the countries that has taken the best preventive measures is actually France, where they've banned BPA in all their food packaging materials and utensils completely. Yeah, so that's what's happening globally. So now let's take a look at what's happening in Malaysia itself. And we'll see that in Malaysia, all the regulations about food packaging and materials is actually governed by the Ministry of Health. And currently, the tests prohibit certain elements such as arsenic, cadmium, and antimony, a maximum limit of 0.2 ppm. And for lead, it's actually 2 ppm. And as long as you adhere to these regulations, your food is actually considered to be safe. So you can see there's no mention of BPA at all. So that's something that is rather troublesome, I guess, from a consumer point of view, right? Yeah. So, and the only thing that is mentioned about BPA in Malaysia is actually in 1st of March 2012, where they've banned the usage of BPA in infant feeding bottles, and that's only for infants, because there's no other things. And I think that's where we can actually start moving towards, especially like there are a lot of brands moving towards BPA free nowadays, and I think from a regulation point of view, we can start looking into that. Yeah.
So what do you think is the way moving forward?
Okay. So the way moving forward, definitely the first thing is to update the list of regulations in the food regulations to include BPA as a toxic material that can cause harm for infertility issues, and to ban it completely from all plastic and all canned packaging. And the second thing I would say it's a very strict monitoring of local manufacturers and imports, because while IM brand has done a very good job of like moving away from BPA free, we cannot just count on other companies or their ethical to be to rely on their ethics to actually make this place. So we actually have to have a very strict monitoring of that. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miss Jessie, for the explanation. So because of the time constraint, I think we should end our discussion here. And as to remind all of us to always be careful with the potential contamination in food packaging before everything goes harm. It is not waste if we keep reminding ourselves to avoid things that can bring negative effects to our health. However, the choice is in your hand. Some might think or feel really whenever the EU has confirmed that the BPA is not accumulating in our body, but some may be careful and be like think twice before they choose food packaging because of the very serious health effects, especially for the reproductive system, you know. And last but not least, I think that we should always think twice whenever we are going to purchase food being packaged in whatever packaging material. So thank you to all the panelists, and thank you for all the listeners.